I believe the number of civilian casualties on the Ukrainian side has now reached 357. That's what I saw on the last report.
A school.
That's the UN official statement. Ukraine claims upwards of thousands of civilians dead. I mean, every single day I repeat this, but of course, I got to repeat it over and over again, which is that like every piece of information that you get from Ukraine currently is going to be either false, like outright false, or half the information. It's the fog of war. Every side has an interest in propagandizing, whether it be to increase the civilian toll, whether it be to decrease the civilian toll on the Russian side, make it seem like they're engaging in a humanitarian mission, whether it's to overestimate their capabilities on the Russian side and claim that like less troops have died actually and we're doing fucking great, or even on the Ukrainian side where they claim, oh, we're winning actually, because the war is fought on all fronts, and what that means is on the information front, which the Ukrainian side has been fucking crushing, okay, absolutely crushing. There is always going to be false information. Sometimes you will never learn what the actual accurate retelling of events looked like, because once the established narrative is established, they're just going to continue with that. Here's an example. I'm sure the story is fake, but I want it to be real. Oh, like this? Yeah. In Kyiv, a woman knocked down a Russian drone from a balcony with a jar of cucumbers. How did they expect to occupy this country? Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, there's no fucking shot that that's real, okay? I'm sorry. There's like 0% chance. Especially because, like, was that like a regular drone? Like, was that a civilian drone? Because real drones like Bayraktar or, actual fucking drones are so incredibly high up in the sky. The only way to genuinely shoot them down is with heat-seeking missiles, because the Bayraktar, for example, has an engine, so it runs hot, or, some kind of radar, some kind of gun, like an anti-air defense weapon with radar capabilities. So it could have been like maybe a small surveillance drone, but even then. Okay, so two different types of analysis that I want to show you. One from friend of the show, HasanAbi head Chelsea Manning, who I've had on the stream so far. I've had on the stream already, but she made an assessment. She made an intelligence assessment, saying that she pulled a redistricting and said, "I've seen enough." That's a meme for the election watchers. Said, "I've seen enough. Russia has no path to victory in Ukraine. They will continue to advance some 96 hours at most, but they lack logistics to win anymore. Note, barring any extraordinary events, tactical nuclear weapons, or broadening of the conflict to other nations' allies." I don't know what she means by tactical nuclear weapons, but however, the Eastern Europe is severely crippled and destabilized for all parties involved. No one wins. Civil conflict would likely erupt now. A crippled Russia without a functioning military or stable government will change the world in unpredictable ways in months ahead. Well, not so unpredictable if you've seen how this has played out in the past in numerous other countries that the United States has involved itself in, and numerous other instances of imperialism in a country that ends up destabilizing a nation. The Afghanistan or the Syria or the Iraq version, but this time in Eastern Europe. In the meantime, Russian convoys are sitting ducks without adequate supply or support. Russia is running out of resources and personnel and is spiraling into a crisis worse than they experienced since the Second World War. Whatever happens now is historic, a Pandora's box. For the record, there is no victory. I don't think she means like there's actually a victory for either side here. There will never be a victory for Russia, just like there will never be a victory for Ukraine. And what I mean by that is, no matter what happens going forward, Ukraine is fucked. No matter what happens going forward, Russia is fucked. The Russian government and the Russian economy will take significant damage that will be damn near impossible to fucking recover from. So on that front, they're totally fucked. Ukraine is totally fucked in the sense that obviously when you have to purge an invading force from your borders, obviously when you have to fight against a massive invading force that's dumping arsenal on your civilian populated cities, and you have given hundreds of thousands of guns to your civilian population, you already have like a complicated political structure. You already have a complicated political situation going on internally. Even before this, you're constantly hanging on the balance of Western forces and Western interests, and also Eastern interests from Russia and Moscow's interests. You already had an incredibly difficult time balancing between the two. And then now on top of that, war has broken out. Everybody has guns. Tensions are super fucking high. It's a powder keg, no matter what happens. With guns left over, Ukraine will be like the US when the war's over. No, the United States has a significant difference between Ukraine. Everybody has guns in the US, but the United States is not destabilized, okay? No matter what happens, our imperial war machine keeps American bellies fed no matter what. Prices are stable for the most part. Like, you don't understand. When you live in America, a couple things that you don't understand when you haven't grown up anywhere else on this fucking planet, when you have no experience other than like maybe tourism. A thing that you don't understand is like when people say like, oh, America's so fucked up. It's so destabilized. It's so terrible. We're fighting each other. Dude, you do not understand. Okay. When you control the world's currency, when you have all the power, when you are the hegemonic global superpower, people living in Iowa, people living in the poorest part of Alabama still have relatively stable fucking prices no matter what happens. You are insane if you think that that is anywhere similar to even a country like Turkey, which is not a developing nation, but an already developed nation that's a NATO nation and yet still suffers significant economic backlash. It's a total Ameribrained attitude to think like, oh, people are just really racist and whatever, so a civil war is going to break off in America, or Ukraine is going to turn into America. Ukraine has always been an incredibly poor country, okay, since its inception. Since 91, Ukraine has always been a fucking poor country. It's always been a volatile country. It has a long history, a long and complicated history with nationalist movements. It has a long and complicated history with nation building. It has a long and complicated history of trying to balance between the Western influence and Russian influence. That on top of like active fucking war turns it into a gigantic clusterfuck. Remember when I told you guys about how, you know, Americans don't understand what it's like to live in a different country in many instances, okay? What I mean by that is this, for example, something as simple as this. I grew up in Turkey. Blackouts were commonplace, okay? Commonplace. It happened once a month almost. And I lived in a cosmopolitan city. I lived in Ankara, I lived in Istanbul, but blackouts would still occur quite regularly, okay? Something that never happens in America unless there's some insane circumstances or, you know, because the Texas government did not realize that climate change was happening. Blackouts and shit like that do not happen in America in the same way. The price of bread, the Marat bread theory, the price of bread is still stable. Lamau, there are blackouts more than once a month still here. Exactly. Like, people don't understand that. People living in America don't understand that. So the likelihood of making a comparison to what's going on in America to what's going on in Ukraine, the likelihood of what is going on in Ukraine or what will happen in Ukraine happening in America is insane. The American infrastructure, as a consequence of like, you know, the New Deal and numerous other developments early on, have been relatively stable and has held on for what, like 50, 60 fucking years. You know what I mean? It's getting worse and worse every day, but ultimately it's still like, it's not something you can ever comprehend or understand. Now, if price stability goes away, then that's a different situation. People can't fucking feed their children. That's when you start seeing a real big problem. Let's continue with the analysis, though. I talked about Chelsea's take. Now I want to talk about the other side. Oh, here's some more successes for Ukraine. A disastrous day for RUAF, the Russian Air Forces, and probably indicates that the thoughts about their PGM situation were true. Russian aircraft are forced to enter Ukrainian short-range air defense range in order to deploy their unguided munitions. The definitive list of Russian Air Force losses in Ukraine over the past 26 hours. I mean, it's just, this is fucking, they're doing a great job with their surface-to-air, like handheld surface-to-air missiles, okay? They are. The NATO weapons flowing into that country have been able to obliterate the Russian Air Forces despite not having a fucking no-fly zone, okay? God damn, those things are good, man. Those things are fucking good. Great job. Downs 10 aircraft when RU has thousands. It doesn't matter. So let's look at the other side. Let's look at a different kind of analysis that we haven't seen so far. We've looked at positive ones, but here's some that is a little not as positive. Clint Ehrlich, who's a foreign policy analyst, says, many analysts are predicting an imminent defeat of the Russian military. In reality, Russia is on the verge of annihilating the bulk of the Ukrainian army. The people denying this are gaslighting you. No, I'm not exaggerating. This viral thread from a prominent expert claims the Russian military is days away from collapsing and suffering the worst defeat in history. Another, even more popular thread predicts the course of the war looking at tires. It claims that maintenance problems observed on a few vehicles show that the Russian forces are doomed. Time for a reality check. Everyone retweeting these threads needs to look at an updated map of the conflict. What they'll find is that the bulk of the Ukrainian military has been encircled in the east of the country. 50% of the Ukrainian military is literally here. The Ukrainian military is stationed in Donbass. 50% of the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian Guard, are all fighting in the eastern region. Now, because they're all fighting in the eastern region, the pincer movement, once they overtake more southern cities and Kharkiv and other northern territories, they can completely fucking encircle. Why the fuck are they in Donbass? Because that's where the bulk of the battle was being shot. You're not really seeing it, but this isn't a fluke. It isn't an accident. In Russia, executing textbook Soviet military doctrine, specifically the doctrine of Cauldron in Russian, the strategic level encirclement of enemy forces, which are then annihilated. I previously pointed out that Russia was attempting to encircle the bulk of the Ukrainian military, but I predicted the Ukrainian forces would try to punch out to escape. I argued that the effort would fail since larger cauldrons could be created. Okay, yet the Russians didn't even have to resort to that. In the open, the Ukrainians are so vulnerable to attack by Russian helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft that they choose to remain in their fortified positions when cities around Kramatorsk. They didn't even try to escape. As a result, the cauldron is now in place. Encirclement is complete. While this is happening, and to the people saying this is a fake Russian map, then give me the Wikipedia map and I'll show you what's going on the Wikipedia map or whatever map you want me to fucking look at as far as like Russian invasion that's occurring currently. Claims these maps are misleading. Okay. I think the visualization teams and many media outlets need to rethink how they map the war. Most do maps like the one on the left, but that's not reflecting their own reporting. There aren't entire areas that are under control. On the right is a far more accurate alternative. Wait, what? Okay, so this literally is the same fucking map, dude. What are they saying? That's like, this is the same map. This is like conservative brain rot election coverage when they go, oh well, you know, look at the entirety of the American country like lit up as red. Yeah, well, these are the fucking population centers, dude. They're controlling the population centers. What the fuck do you mean? When you control the roads in a fucking country, in a population center, you control the population center. I think the point they're trying to make is that the encircling is not as quite as severe as being painted. They have limited advancement in the north, supposedly. It still is not looking good for Russia regardless, okay? And I need people to understand that. This doesn't mean that Russia is like fucking crushing it. Not even half, like 75 to 90% of the media keeps telling you that like, it's over. Russians have been fucking dominated. Russians have been domed into oblivion. Look at all these broken down Russian supplies. And Ukraine is winning. People misunderstand what I say when I say this is successful or unsuccessful. It's not successful for either party, no matter what happens. A lot of people play fast and loose with the metrics of success, what they consider to be success. Some people think that Ukrainians being able to win, Ukrainians being able to push back Russian invasion forces in airports, for example, is success. And I do believe that. I agree. I agree. I think it is incredibly successful because the Ukrainian forces have overperformed thus far in defending and is able to purge the Russian forces and has been able to still fly planes out. Like, that is a gigantic dub for Ukraine. And that is a gigantic L for Russia, if we're going to use terms like that. No small army can beat the third largest army on earth. Stop this nonsense, chat. It's entirely dependent on how brutal Russia chooses to be. And they have slowly, steadily increased the brutality in a lot of the cities that they're trying to take. The harder it gets for them to take cities by just simply trying to disable military outposts, the more they're going to shell civilian territories. The more they're going to claim, oh man, there's people fighting. There's people shooting at us. So we have to fucking bomb residential buildings. Oops. That's just how that's how just war works in general. This puts into perspective what the Taliban did in Afghanistan. Quite extraordinary, the way they did it so quick. Yeah, because if the Russian forces retreated today and said, all right, Ukraine is yours, then of course the Ukrainian forces would immediately take it over. It's Ukraine. The Taliban are Afghan citizens. It's their country. Of course they took it immediately. and much faster than Western intelligence anticipated it, because they didn't fucking, there was no resistance to it. The people that were supposed to fight in the Afghan security forces, either because they knew that they were going to be overwhelmed or because they literally were like, oh, thank God, finally Americans are gone, decided, okay, let's, we're done. Okay, Taliban is now the government. Whether they like it or not, that is the government. And they had to fucking concede. Aren't they trying to get civilians out of the area they encircled just so they can level it? I think so. That's what I thought. The moment that I saw humanitarian corridors opening in Mariupol, I assumed the reason why they wanted to open humanitarian corridors in Mariupol was so they could fucking level it. Sure, that's not going to be easy. Okay, it's not going to be easy at all, considering Ukrainians have been able to put a strong front in defending against aerial assaults. They keep fucking murking helicopters and planes, but there's 400,000 people in Mariupol, like 400,000 civilians. It's a terrifying prospect no matter what. What do you think about Ukraine releasing prisoners to defend Ukraine? Do you think any will go rogue and kill anyone and everyone? First of all, prisoners don't do that. I don't know why you think that that's a thing. No, releasing prisoners to defend Ukraine is never a good sign, okay? That's a sign of desperation. It's not a, like, I don't know why you think prisoners are like serial killers, like all prisoners are serial killers. Like you give them guns and they're just going to start fucking killing random people. Like a prisoner is not like an NPC, okay? I don't know why you think that. As a result, the cauldron is now in pace. Encirclement is complete. Russia is creating humanitarian corridors to clear civilians from the area. It will soon have free hand to use heavy weapons against the trapped Ukrainian defenders. I agree with this take as well. Even if the humanitarian corridors were not going to fucking work, they now will be able to say, oh, we tried. Everybody left. Anyone who has stayed in Mariupol is now no longer a fucking civilian, but an enemy combatant. And then they will continue fucking shelling and leveling Mariupol. Specifically, Russian conventional and rocket artillery, which will inflict massive losses. They will be augmented with heavy bombing. The Ukrainians will attempt to hide in requisitioned civilian buildings, and those buildings will be utterly destroyed. Whatever the casualty ratio is now in the conflict is about to swing far into Russia's favor. The bombardment that will see plays to the strengths of the RU forces. It will allow them to remain in a standoff distances and inflict devastating losses via superior firepower. And I think Zelensky recognizes that. And that's part of the reason why he has been actively trying to institute a no-fly zone no matter what happens. Please, a no-fly zone. Please put a no-fly zone together. Please put a no-fly zone together. You know, they don't want Russian aircrafts to just fucking drop munitions, like a fuckload of munitions on top of civilian territory, that civilian cities that are now supposedly evacuated when they fucking aren't. Whatever the casualty ratio is in conflict. So let's return to the narratives. In Russia's maintenance is so bad the vehicles cannot even operate on Ukrainian mud. How did Russia outmaneuver such a huge chunk of the Ukrainian military? It would be impossible to believe that Russia is on the verge of defeat. You have to engage in a bottom-up analysis. Looking at some photos and videos and trying to construct grand narratives. That is, I look at the maps and objectives. I infer the side is winning the war from who's achieving their goals plus executing their grand strategy. The advantage of this approach is objectivity. It's hard to be misled out of context. Using my approach, the biggest question mark is why Russians have not made progress towards Kyiv. Not entirely clear. Fierce Ukrainian resistance from special forces certainly has something to do with it, but there are other potential explanations. The most plausible is that Russia wants to maximize the ratio of attackers to defenders when it takes Kyiv. In order to do that, it will need to completely defeat the Ukrainian forces in the east so that the full array of battalion tactical groups is available. Specifically, Russian forces advancing in the north towards Kyiv may delay their approach until they're joined by BTGs currently in the south and east of the country. A triple pincer formation would then advance in the Ukrainian capital with a massive numerical advantage. Alternative explanations is the pluckiness of the Ukrainian defenders has taken Russia by surprise, and Russia's logistics are also broken. They can't even compare. Fail to account that Russia's success in the east of the country. In medical terms, what I'm making is a differential diagnosis. Yes, Russia's failure to advance Kyiv could mean its forces are simply overmatched, but then when combined with the other evidence, that isn't most likely hypothesis, so don't get your hopes up. It's not that complicated. Ukraine has most of its troops defending Kyiv while Russia is making an offensive war all over it. That's not true. The majority of Ukrainian forces are stationed in the Eastern Front, which is where a lot of people assumed Russia would probably end its military conquest. And they've also been there. Because of Donbass. Predators gave away Ukrainian positions. I don't believe this. Soldier posts on Facebook his exact location to his friends and fellow Redditors in private. Redditor posts the images on Reddit for updudes. Russians scrolling through the subreddit gets confirmation that Ukrainians are using schools as bases. Russians shell every abandoned school in the area, massacring everybody. A Redditor single-handedly got multiple safe zones exposed for upvotes. I don't believe that. That's fake. no shot. It's another classic fucking example of people overestimating the power of Reddit and underestimating the power of satellite imagery that military uses. Like, if you think the Russians don't already know the fucking positions of where troops are stationed and are relying on fucking Reddit and 4chan, you are another type of person who thinks like memes are the reason why Donald Trump won. We have this tendency to overestimate the things that are immediately in our vicinity, the things that we are experiencing regularly, and this is one of those things. Like, these motherfuckers have drones, they have satellites, they have saboteurs, they have people that are signaling different locations. This is a country that they've had control over politically. This is a country that they've had control over militarily for throughout its history. It's ridiculous to think that like they need a fucking 4chan post or a Reddit post to be able to capture the full information. You want to feel like it is. You want to feel like it's true because it's true in your world. Your only way of understanding what's going on in this war is by looking at Twitter and by looking at Reddit. So you just you have a tendency to overestimate the power that Reddit holds.
Zelensky posting another video on social media, both proof of life and encouragement to his people, affirming he is still in Kyiv. Nobody ran away. We are still working, he said. I'm here in my place.
I don't think him evacuating to Poland is going to look good. It's going to hurt morale. Him evacuating to Poland hurts morale. It makes the citizens feel like, oh shit, Kyiv might be taken soon. And that is like, makes him look like a Western puppet. And now the West is discussing who will succeed Zelensky if he gets killed. Holy shit. This is pieces of information that is significantly more devastating than the fucking broken down Russian machinery that you see on the internet from OSINT Twitter, okay? This is the real shit. This is when the big boys are putting up contingency plans. I have a few extended family in Kharkiv. No joke. That's the reason at the moment they can't leave. We're trying to organize safe transfer. You're saying that like the actual security forces on the ground, the Ukrainian security forces are not allowing them to leave. Is that what you're saying? I have heard reports about, I've seen reports about people not being allowed to evacuate. Part of the reason why they don't want people to evacuate is because if they do evacuate, then Russia will literally fucking level the city. If humanitarian corridors are opened and every civilian leaves in a 400,000 city, then they could just fucking level it and claim every single person on the ground in Mariupol is now Azov battalion, is now fucking enemy combatants, and that it's gonna get fucking leveled. You don't know that? What do you mean I don't know that? That's the perspective. Why else would they not want fucking? Why else would the security forces not allow civilians to leave in that situation? Even if civilians don't evacuate in its entirety, if enough people are evacuating the city, they could just, the Russian forces are going to say, hey, look, everyone left. Everyone remaining is an enemy combatant. Boom. Time for artillery to come in. But isn't that using civilians as a human shield? Yes and no. The reason why I say no is because it's fucking bullshit. Because there would be no human shield conversation because if Russia was not invading. So the only reason why there is something to be shielded from is because Russia is shelling or is going to increase its shelling. So it's still fucking bullshit. And Russia is still at fault. Russia is still 100% at fault. There is no instance where Russia looks good when they are the invading forces. The civilians would not need to fucking leave if Russia was not bombing the fucking shit out of the country. If Russia was not invading the country. Please understand that it does not matter. The whole like civilian shield argument is really fucking stupid because in a weird way it acts like the invading force is absolved of the sin of and the crimes that they are committing. You know, there is no such concept. As someone also correctly pointed out in the chat, notably, all the civilians fleeing Nazis are still heading west. Exactly. It's not like the civilians that are fleeing the Azov battalion or whatever are not fucking going into Russian hands and going, please save us. Save us from the Azov battalion by bombing my fucking school and my hospital and my roads and the apartment complex that I live in. You know, that's not how you save a nation. Okay, so it's fucking bullshit. But the humanitarian point here is to absolutely allow civilians to evacuate, like immediately. Russia should have waited another 8 years of Donbass genocide for Minsk 2 to happen, Kopega. I love this fucking take that these idiots have where they're like, oh yeah, there's a genocide in Donbass. Totally, dude. Yeah, it was totally one-sided. That's how genocides work. Genocides is when one side is getting gear and weapons and armaments from the Russian military that they privately purchased on their own and able to kill almost half the fucking casualties. If you're going to recognize that civilians that are now armed are considered enemy combatants when trying to defend the actions of Russia, then you also have to literally fucking understand that it's not a genocide if both sides are fucking armed and fighting one another for 8 fucking years. And yes, excuse me for believing that some kind of peaceful negotiation that even Western leadership, with the exception of the United States of America, would have eliminated a large chunk of the problems that you're experiencing currently. There's a difference between a genocide and a difference between a proxy war happening inside of Ukrainian borders with the Russian ethnic minority constantly fighting against the Ukrainian National Guard, the Azov forces, and trying to maintain its autonomy. And I have made no excuses for the Ukrainian government's handling of that situation either. I have criticized the Ukrainian government numerous times for Donbass in the lead up to this war. But now it's over. The balance is shifted. It's irrelevant to, at this point, have that conversation unless you're talking about a potential off-ramp for Vladimir Putin where concessions will be made that at the very least make him look somewhat good and then that he will be happy with, which I don't even know if he will, for the Ukrainians to decide their future and what relations they want or don't want. Okay, I mean, so Ukrainians currently want a no-fly zone instituted over Ukraine. Is that happening? I understand that they have every right to demand certain things or want certain things, but you also have to understand the consequences of certain demands and the likelihood that whether they'll happen or not. You're right. It would be great if no one had fucking nuclear weapons, okay? If no one had nukes, it would be wonderful if there could be more nice straw man with a no-fly zone that is not a straw man. The Ukrainian government has asked for a no-fly zone numerous fucking times. And the reason why America is not doing that is because they understand, unlike the fucking dumb brain-diseased Zoomers in here who completely fail to understand what a no-fly zone actually is that a no-fly zone has to be enforced. A no-fly zone has to be enforced by another country, specifically a NATO country. Specifically, a NATO country, just like putting boots on the ground, would have to send fucking airplanes from NATO countries into Ukrainian airspace and fly around and drop Russian planes that are flying in that area. That is a direct act of war. There is a reason why since World War II we have not had two nuclear superpowers in direct conflict with one another and exclusively had proxy wars like what is going on currently in Ukraine in a little bit. I honestly don't get the nuclear angle. I mean, I do, but like if Putin used nukes, it wouldn't be our fault or justifiable, implying otherwise like a battered woman brain. Wait, what? It doesn't matter if someone uses nukes. If one nuke is launched, all nukes are launched. Why don't you recognize this? This is what I've been saying. Who cares who's at fault at that point, you fucking weirdo? What are you, is your brain so broken on the internet about like winning online debates or something that like what? So when the fucking nukes are flying over, when the intercontinental ballistic missiles are flying in the direction of fucking Europe, are you going to be there and stating, hey, I was right, by the way, this was all Russia's fault? Yeah, okay. Who cares at that point, dude? The world is done. The world is over. It's nuclear holocaust. Are you going to go to your fucking bunker and tweet out from the bunker that you're in that like, this was actually, make no mistake, this was not the fault of the United States of America. Who cares? Who cares about the optics in that point? I'm fucking, I'm collecting bottle caps and fighting, ghouls in the nuclear swampland of the Great Lakes as I tweet out, I want everyone to know that this was not America's fault, and it was entirely on Russia. To the 150,000 other survivors on what is now the fucking nuclear crater of the United States of America. Everyone will fucking say, yes, Queen, you are so right.